The studio lights shimmered across the polished floor, reflecting off Taehyung's sharp features as his heartbeat hammered in his chest. Everything had been rehearsed 1,000 times, every step, every smile, every glance toward Jungkook meticulously planned, or so he thought. Yet here he was in the quiet moments before the cameras rolled, a storm simmering behind his calm exterior. He could feel it, the tension coiling in his stomach, the electricity in the air that only came when something real was about to happen. He watched Jungkook from across the room, unaware of the gaze that had lingered far too long, oblivious to the way Taehyung's chest tightened whenever the younger moved, laughed, or even exhaled. It was supposed to be just another broadcast, another performance, another day where they smiled for the fans while keeping everything carefully contained. But tonight the air was different. Tonight nothing felt contained. Taehyung's fingers drummed against the edge of the piano. Every nerve in his body screamed at him to stop, to retreat, to wait. But the thought of waiting, of holding back, had grown unbearable. The rehearsals, the late-night calls, the stolen glances, they had all led to this moment. He could almost hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears as he approached Jungkook, every step deliberate, every breath a battle between courage and fear. "You're really concentrated," Taehyung said softly, a teasing smile playing on his lips, though it didn't reach the depths of his eyes. Jungkook looked up, his expression casual at first, then slowly unraveling into something unreadable as he registered the intensity in Taehyung's gaze. The camera crews were setting up, the producers murmuring into their earpieces, but for a moment the world contracted. There was only him and Jungkook, and the electricity between them that refused to be ignored. Taehyung swallowed hard, the words he had rehearsed dying on his tongue. He couldn't announce it, couldn't explain it. He only knew the truth. He couldn't pretend anymore, not to himself, not to the world, and certainly not to Jungkook. And then, with a sudden impulse, a courage that surprised even him, he closed the distance. His hand brushed against Jungkook's arm, a fleeting contact that sent a jolt through them both. Jungkook froze, breath hitching, eyes widening in a mixture of shock and something deeper, something Taehyung had been longing to see for months. It was like time itself paused, waiting for a choice that neither of them could reverse. He saw the hesitation, the tension, the unspoken question flickering in Jungkook's gaze. And Taehyung, in that instant, knew he couldn't wait any longer. He leaned in, slow, deliberate, and pressed his lips to Jungkook. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a declaration, a confession, a rebellion against everything they had been forced to hide. The seconds stretched, impossibly long, every sound in the studio fading into silence. Then came the reaction, not from them but from the world. A collective gasp that seemed to rise from the control room, from the live chat, from screens across the globe. The cameras captured it all, unblinking, relentless, exposing their truth in ways neither had planned. Jungkook's eyes fluttered open, a mixture of surprise and confusion flooding his features. He didn't pull away immediately, but the pause, the space between them, was sharp, slicing through Taehyung like ice. The studio lights seemed to flicker in response, as if even they were uncertain what to illuminate. The producers' voices pierced the tension. Cut, cut to commercial. And suddenly, chaos erupted. Crew members shouted over one another, equipment clattered to the floor, and phones buzzed incessantly as managers scrambled to control a situation that had already slipped beyond their grasp. Taehyung's heart pounded, a strange mixture of exhilaration and panic. He stepped back, hands trembling not from fear of Jungkook, but from the weight of everything they had just unleashed. He had crossed a line, and the world had seen it. Jungkook remained frozen for a heartbeat longer, then backed away, eyes wide and shimmering with emotions Taehyung couldn't yet name. The silence between them was heavier than the music that still played faintly in the background. Taehyung wanted to speak, to explain, to reassure, but no words could undo what had been done. He only knew he had acted on truth, on a feeling too powerful to deny any longer. Backstage was a whirlwind. Staff yelled over each other, PR managers barricaded the green room, and phones rang without cease. Taehyung retreated to a corner, leaning against a wall, trying to steady his breathing. His reflection in the mirrored dressing room revealed the chaos etched into his features. eyes wide, lips slightly parted, hair damp with nervous sweat. He had wanted honesty, and now he had it, at a cost he hadn't fully measured. Memories cascaded over him unbidden. The late-night rehearsals when Jungkook laughed at a joke no one else understood, the accidental brush of hands during photo shoots, the stolen moments backstage that had meant more than either had allowed themselves to admit. And yet, for all the intimacy they shared in secret, the public exposure made it raw, dangerous, real. He had made a move, and now everything was out of control. Hours later, Jungkook finally spoke, voice trembling but steady, his gaze locked on Taehyung's. "Why did you do it?" he asked, a quiet fury in his tone. Taehyung's lips parted, words faltering. I couldn't wait anymore," he admitted, voice low, heavy with vulnerability. Jungkook's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. The anger wasn't directed at him, Taehyung realized. It was aimed at the world that had forced them into secrecy, at the cameras, at the life they had chosen but never fully owned. And then the backlash began. Clips of the kiss circulated instantly, fan reactions erupted, media outlets speculated wildly, and Hybe issued a statement that only fueled the chaos. Jungkook didn't attend schedules. Taehyung showed up pale but poised, facing questions that cut sharper than knives. He apologized not for the kiss, but for the consequences it had set into motion. His hands remained clasped, an anchor in a storm that threatened to tear them both apart. The night closed in with tension and uncertainty. Behind closed doors, Jungkook was unraveling, staring at the ring Taehyung had returned last year, hands shaking, heart exposed. Taehyung sat nearby, silent, letting the weight of the world press down on them both. This was more than a kiss. It was a rebellion, a confession, a declaration that neither would be silent any longer. And as Taehyung waited for Jungkook's response, he knew that whatever came next, whether acceptance, rejection, or chaos, they had crossed a point of no return. The morning after the broadcast, the world had already exploded. Social media feeds flooded with clips of the kiss, countless angles, slowed-down footage, and fan reactions ranging from pure elation to outright fury. Headlines screamed in bold, accusatory fonts. Taehyung breaks silence on live broadcast. Jungkook reacts to public kiss, idol scandal unfolds. The chaos was instantaneous, relentless, and impossible to contain. Backstage, Taehyung's manager pulled him aside, voice tight with panic. "You know this could cost everything, sponsorships, deals in Japan, your upcoming solo project, everything." Taehyung's jaw tightened. He had expected consequences, but the scale of it was staggering. He swallowed, steadying his racing thoughts. "I know," he said quietly, "but I'd rather lose everything than live a lie." His gaze drifted toward the studio entrance, where Jungkook had vanished hours ago, unreachable, as if the world itself had swallowed him whole. The silence between them had never felt so heavy. Taehyung wandered the empty hallways of the studio, hands in his pockets, reflection fragmented across the glass walls. He thought of all the moments he had kept secret, the fleeting touches in rehearsal rooms, late-night phone calls where laughter was layered with unspoken longing, the small but intimate gestures no one else had ever noticed. Those moments had been his truth, his anchor. And now they had been broadcasted, dissected, and weaponized by everyone but them. Jungkook's absence gnawed at him. He had returned to his apartment hours later, but Taehyung had barely had a chance to process anything before messages and calls flooded his phone. Every notification carried potential disaster. PR teams demanding statements, brands requesting apologies, and worst of all, whispers from the media about Hybe executives scrambling to contain the fallout. Taehyung wanted to scream, to demand the world stop, but he knew that wasn't possible. All he could do was wait for Jungkook. Finally, late that evening, Jungkook appeared. His eyes were unreadable. But Taehyung could feel the storm behind them. "Why did you do it?" Jungkook asked quietly, voice trembling but firm. The question hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Taehyung swallowed, stepping closer, trying to bridge the gap between them. "Because I couldn't lie anymore," he whispered, almost to himself. The confession hung between them, fragile yet undeniable. Jungkook's gaze softened, but only briefly. "You made it public. You forced me into this," he said, voice tight with frustration. Taehyung felt a pang of guilt but also an unfamiliar resolve. "I didn't force you. I wanted truth, not silence." The room was still, save for the distant hum of the city outside. Rain streaked down the windows, mirroring the tremor in both of their hearts. The hours that followed were spent in uneasy conversation. Words came and went, fragments of fear and longing, anger and vulnerability. Taehyung listened as Jungkook recounted his dread, threats from his family, calls from executives, the weight of fans' expectations crashing on him from all sides. Taehyung's chest ached. He hadn't considered how deeply their world was controlled, how every personal decision became a public spectacle. He had acted on impulse, yes, but never with the intention to harm. Jungkook, finally breaking the silence, reached for the ring Taehyung had returned months ago, hidden under his sleeve. His fingers shook as he held it, a symbol of a past both tender and painful. Taehyung's eyes followed him, and in that small gesture he saw every unspoken memory they had shared. The rooftop nights, the rehearsals, the stolen glances that were never meant to be witnessed. They were all encapsulated in this one quiet, trembling act. "I don't want to fight anymore," Jungkook admitted softly, voice thick with emotion. I want to feel without the world watching, without everything being twisted into something we didn't choose." Taehyung nodded, heart pounding. He wanted the same. He wanted privacy, intimacy, a space where they could exist without fear, without scrutiny. And yet the world had already intruded, leaving its mark like a scar. Taehyung pulled Jungkook into a tentative embrace, careful, almost afraid to make contact. Jungkook stiffened for a moment, then relaxed against him, letting the warmth of their closeness seep into his bones. It was a fragile truce, a brief respite from the chaos outside. They didn't speak. Words weren't necessary. The storm raged beyond their walls, but here in this small apartment there was stillness, if only for a heartbeat. The next day brought new challenges. The leaked video, amplified by both fans and media, had gone viral. Analysts dissected their every gesture, commentators debated their intentions, and executives demanded control over narratives they no longer possessed. Taehyung faced cameras with a calm exterior, but inside, his mind raced. Every press question, every flash of the lens, every whispered comment felt like fire against his skin. Yet amidst the chaos there were moments of solidarity. Fellow idols, friends, and even former colleagues began to voice support, subtle at first, then more overt. Messages flooded in. "Love isn't a scandal. Be brave, be true." The tide of public opinion shifted, a delicate balance between condemnation and empathy. Taehyung read each message, each tweet, each heartfelt comment, and felt a strange mix of hope and dread. The world could still be cruel, but it could also be unexpectedly compassionate. As night fell, Jungkook and Taehyung found themselves alone again, the apartment cloaked in dim light. Words came slowly this time, careful and measured. "Do you ever regret it?" Taehyung asked quietly, not wanting an immediate answer. Jungkook's lips pressed into a thin line, fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "No," he finally said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I wish we had controlled the timing. I wish it hadn't been forced into the world like that." Taehyung nodded, understanding but unable to fully accept. "I couldn't wait," he said. "Not anymore. I had to do it before the moment passed, before we lost ourselves in silence." Jungkook looked at him then, eyes glistening with emotion he could no longer hide. The tension between longing and fear was palpable, a tightrope stretched over the chasm of their public lives. The following days were a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Every move, every decision, every public appearance was scrutinized. Taehyung found himself caught between protecting Jungkook and asserting their truth. He wrote lyrics late at night, pouring the rawness of their experiences into songs that were honest, painful, and beautiful. Music became their refuge, a way to navigate a world that refused to stop demanding perfection from them. One evening, after a long day of press and fan interactions, Taehyung found Jungkook at the piano. The younger's fingers hovered above the keys, hesitant, uncertain. Taehyung approached slowly, not daring to interrupt. "Play," he whispered. Jungkook exhaled and let the notes fall, soft, melancholic, yet full of resonance. The music carried the weight of everything unsaid, everything hidden, everything discovered too late yet finally acknowledged. Hours melted into each other. They spoke in fragments, sometimes in silence, sometimes in laughter, always in the small, intimate ways that reminded them of why they had taken the risk. Even as the world around them spiraled into chaos, they clung to these moments, fragile but undeniable. By the end of the week, a statement from Jungkook appeared on social media, a poem cryptic yet revealing, lines like, "There is a fire between two hearts and some flames aren't meant to be hidden. We can choose to let them burn or we can let them define us." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Fans debated, media speculated, but the core truth remained untouched. They had chosen authenticity, and nothing else could undo that. In the quiet aftermath, Taehyung and Jungkook sat together on the apartment balcony, legs dangling over the edge, the city lights flickering below like distant stars. "Do you think we'll be okay?" Jungkook asked, voice soft and uncertain. Taehyung's hand found his, squeezing gently. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know we'll be us." They didn't need more than that. In a world full of chaos, confusion, and scrutiny, that was enough. For a fleeting moment, the storm outside seemed to pause. The city hummed with life, indifferent yet alive, and they sat together, holding hands, letting the world rage while they simply existed. It wasn't a solution, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for Taehyung, for Jungkook, reality was finally enough. The next morning arrived like an executioner's bell. Taehyung awoke to the faint buzzing of his phone, messages, notifications, and emails piling up like a digital avalanche. Every headline seemed louder than the last, every clip more dissected. Taehyung breaks idol code, Jungkook responds in poetic confession. Hype execs scramble after K-pop kiss goes viral. Idol romance or PR stunt. Fans demand answers. He sat up, shoulders tight, heart racing. The world hadn't just noticed the kiss, it had weaponized it. He reached for his jacket, already knowing what awaited him at the label's office. Jungkook hadn't been there yet, and Taehyung wasn't sure he wanted him to be. Every step toward the elevator felt heavier, weighted by the unseen eyes of a million strangers. He could almost hear their collective gaze, dissecting him, judging him, demanding that he apologize or at least conform. He didn't. He couldn't. Not now. Not ever. The car ride to the headquarters was quiet, a tense silence broken only by the distant city hum and the occasional rumble of traffic. Taehyung stared out the window, watching raindrops race across the glass, tracing irregular paths down the pane. It felt almost poetic, the chaos outside mirrored by the storm within. He had acted on instinct, on truth, on a desire that had consumed him for months, and now everything had turned upside down. Jungkook arrived separately and the air between them was charged. Neither spoke immediately. When they stepped into the building together, security swept them past reporters with professional efficiency, but Taehyung could feel the weight of every camera flash, every whispered question, every prying glance. He glanced at Jungkook, whose jaw was tight, hands curled into fists at his sides. They both understood the stakes. This wasn't just a scandal. This was a battle for autonomy, for truth, for survival. The CEO's office was cold and sterile, every inch of it meticulously arranged to exude authority. Taehyung and Jungkook were led in, the door closing with a decisive thud behind them. The man behind the desk regarded them with barely concealed fury, his sharp eyes assessing, calculating, threatening. "I trusted you," he began. Voice ice. "I built an empire with you, and now, in one impulsive act, you threaten to dismantle everything." Taehyung took a deep breath, steadying himself. "The empire was never ours," he said evenly. "It belonged to everyone but us, and we're done being ghosts in our own lives." The CEO's hand slammed the desk, papers rattling. "Do you understand what you've done? International deals are in jeopardy, sponsorships pulled, your legacy, everything, is at risk." Jungkook finally spoke, his voice measured, strong. "Our legacy isn't defined by fear, it's defined by truth, by the choices we make, even if the world doesn't approve." Taehyung felt a rush of pride, but it was tempered by dread. They were staring down a storm far bigger than themselves, yet neither wavered. Threats escalated. Legal teams were mobilized, contracts waved like weapons, and financial consequences were presented with the precision of a scalpel. The label demanded a joint statement denying the relationship, spinning the narrative into fan service or edited content. Taehyung and Jungkook exchanged glances. Both knew compliance would mean suffocating their own truth. "Then let them blacklist us," Taehyung said, voice calm but steel beneath it. "We're not afraid of the dark anymore." Jungkook nodded. The CEO's face turned red, veins standing out at his temples. "You are making a colossal mistake," he hissed. "This will ruin you, your careers, your families, and everything you've worked for." "And if it does," Jungkook replied, steady as a metronome, "it will be because we finally lived our truth, not because we hid behind lies." Taehyung felt his chest tighten with the sheer audacity of it, the courage it took to confront not only the system but their own fears. After the meeting, they emerged into a sea of reporters and cameras. Flashbulbs exploded like gunfire, voices overlapping, all demanding explanations. Taehyung's grip found Jungkook's hand. The gesture was small, almost insignificant to outsiders, but it was everything between them, a declaration of solidarity, of defiance, of mutual protection. The first public statement from Jungkook came later that night. Not a confession, not a denial, but a poem. Lines poured onto social media. "There is fire between us and some flames aren't meant to be hidden. We can choose to let them burn or we can let them define us." The reaction was instantaneous. Fans debated, media speculated, the world erupted into both chaos and awe. The core truth remained untouchable. They had chosen authenticity. Taehyung spent hours packing their apartment afterward, phone in hand, scrolling through reactions that ranged from love to vitriol. His chest ached under the weight of public scrutiny, yet he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Jungkook sat at the edge of the couch, quiet, still, processing in his own way. When their eyes met, a silent understanding passed between them. What they had done was irreversible, but also necessary. Over the next days, they navigated interviews, fan calls, and media appearances with a delicate choreography. Every word was calculated yet honest, every gesture carefully restrained but genuine. Taehyung found himself writing lyrics in stolen moments, music as a conduit for their raw emotions. Jungkook, too, found solace in creating, letting melodies carry what words couldn't. Yet outside their controlled bubbles, the storm continued. News outlets speculated on their personal lives, old scandals were dredged up, and every action they took was scrutinized for ulterior motives. But amidst this, unexpected allies emerged. Fellow artists, some cryptically, others openly, voiced support. Former trainees and colleagues spoke out, reminding the world that love, truth, and autonomy were not crimes. One night after a particularly grueling press session, Taehyung found Jungkook alone on the apartment balcony, legs dangling over the edge, staring into the city lights below. The rain had ceased, leaving the streets glistening, reflecting neon signs and passing headlights. Taehyung joined him silently, sliding his hand into Jungkook's. "Do you think we'll survive this?" he asked softly. Jungkook's gaze didn't leave the skyline. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I do know we'll survive together. That's what matters." Taehyung nodded, feeling the tight knot of anxiety in his chest ease slightly. They had no roadmap, no guarantees, only each other, and that, for the first time, felt enough. In the quiet that followed, they reflected on everything they had sacrificed and gained. The kiss had ignited a firestorm, yes, but it had also stripped away pretenses, forcing them to confront their desires, their fears, and their truths. For all the chaos, for all the threats and consequences, the rawness of their connection remained untarnished. And then late at night, a new development arrived, one that would escalate the conflict even further. Leaked audio surfaced, not of them but of Hybe executives, strategizing how to suppress their relationship, discussing manipulative PR tactics, threats, and attempts to control the narrative. The leak went viral, trending worldwide. Social media exploded. Fans demanded accountability. Hashtags trended for days, and a wave of public support for Taehyung and Jungkook surged like a tidal force. Taehyung sat back, exhaustion weighing heavily on his body, but relief flickered through him. Finally, the truth had been amplified, not silenced. He looked at Jungkook, who remained at the window, silent but resolute. "They can't control us anymore," Taehyung said, voice low, steady. Jungkook turned, eyes glassy but fierce. "We'll survive this, together." For the first time, the apartment felt like a sanctuary. No press, no flashing cameras, no demands. Just two people who had chosen each other against all odds. Outside, the world continued to spin, tumultuous and unforgiving, but inside there was clarity, there was truth, and there was connection. That night they slept side by side, the weight of the storm pressing around them but not against them. The days that followed were a blur of tension, uncertainty, and relentless scrutiny. Every time Taehyung and Jungkook stepped outside, it felt like stepping into a battlefield. Flashing cameras, shouted questions, and invisible eyes followed them relentlessly. Every fan tweet, every article, every comment carried weight. Some celebrated their courage. Others condemned it as reckless, naive, or scandalous. Yet through it all, Taehyung felt a strange clarity, a fierce, unshakable determination that this was the life he had chosen, with all its risks and rewards. Inside their shared apartment, the atmosphere was a fragile mix of tension and intimacy. Jungkook moved cautiously, his gestures measured, yet every glance toward Taehyung conveyed a quiet reassurance. Taehyung, in turn, found himself packing more than usual, restless and anxious, feeling the pressure of both external and internal expectations pressing down. Their world had shifted overnight, from rehearsals and interviews to crisis management and survival. A survival not just of careers, but of their very existence as themselves. The first challenge came in the form of family pressure. Jungkook's parents called incessantly, their voices trembling with worry, veiled threats, and cultural expectations. "You must issue a statement," his father demanded during one long, tense call. "Do you understand what you are doing to our reputation, to the family?" Jungkook's jaw clenched, but he didn't respond immediately. Taehyung sat beside him, hand lightly pressing against his shoulder. "You don't have to answer now," he whispered. "You're allowed to think for yourself." Jungkook exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of autonomy press down, yet supported by Taehyung's calm presence. Taehyung himself was not immune to familial pressure. Messages from his father had arrived, formal, polite, yet edged with an unmistakable sharpness. "Control the narrative for your career's sake. A single mistake could ruin you. Don't let personal feelings dictate professional actions." Taehyung's hand trembled slightly as he set the phone down. This was the world he had chosen, a world that demanded perfection and obedience, punishing vulnerability. And yet he had acted anyway, for a truth that no one else could dictate. The media storm intensified. Clips of the kiss circulated endlessly, slowed down, enhanced, commented upon. Analysts dissected body language, motive, and timing as if they were legal evidence. Every public statement from Taehyung and Jungkook was scrutinized, sometimes misquoted or twisted to fit narratives of scandal and deceit. Yet each time they found ways to push back, carefully, deliberately, with truth and subtle defiance threaded through their words. Each interview, each live appearance was a strategic chess move, measured and precise, but always grounded in authenticity. Despite the chaos, there were moments of surprising intimacy. One night, after a grueling day of interviews and emergency meetings, they found themselves alone on the apartment balcony. The city sprawled below, alive and indifferent. Rain had just passed, leaving streets slick and glimmering under neon lights. Taehyung leaned against the railing, hand finding Jungkook. "Do you ever wonder if it's worth it?" he asked softly. Jungkook didn't answer immediately, letting the silence stretch. Then quietly he said, "I do. Because if it weren't worth it, I wouldn't be here with you." Taehyung's chest tightened at the words. In a world determined to tear them apart, there was still this: connection, choice, and unspoken trust. Pressure from the label escalated as well. Hype executives demanded private meetings, strategy sessions, and immediate solutions. They attempted to leverage their global influence, warning of lost sponsorships, canceled concerts, and blacklisted opportunities. Taehyung, usually acquiescent in these settings, found a new resolve. He met every ultimatum with measured defiance, reminding executives that careers built on fear were hollow. Jungkook mirrored him, their shared conviction a subtle rebellion against a system designed to control them. Amid the turbulence, they also faced fans directly. Some were outraged, feeling betrayed or misled, while others rallied, creating movements, hashtags, and fan campaigns in support. Justice for Taehyung and Jungkook trended globally, symbolizing both resistance and love. Letters, messages, and gifts flooded their inboxes, some heartfelt, some pleading, some angry, but all a testament to the intensity of the public's investment. Taehyung read through them with Jungkook beside him, their hands occasionally brushing, grounding each other amidst the deluge. The emotional strain was relentless. Sleep came in fragmented hours, often interrupted by notifications or urgent calls. Meals were skipped, replaced with cups of coffee or instant noodles eaten in the dim glow of apartment lights. Yet in stolen moments there was laughter, a brief, almost illicit relief. A shared joke about a fan edit, a playful nudge, a music video comment that made them grin. These small joys were essential, reminders that the world could be cruel and chaotic, yet still contained pockets of light. Legally, the situation grew more complex. Leaked internal communications revealed coercion, threats, and attempts to manipulate public perception. The leak, while explosive, also provided leverage. Lawyers mobilized, fans mobilized, and social media became both a battlefield and a shield. Taehyung, typically more reactive, found clarity in planning their moves carefully, when to speak, when to remain silent, how to balance exposure with protection. Jungkook was meticulous as ever, coordinating with him, their decisions intertwined in trust and strategy. Then came the most challenging confrontation, a meeting with global media representatives and brand partners. They sat at a long table, surrounded by executives, reporters, and legal advisors. Each brand questioned their stability, their reliability, their marketability. Every answer from Taehyung and Jungkook had to be precise yet authentic, assertive yet non-confrontational. They navigated the questions like tightrope walkers, balancing truth, image, and consequences. Their hands brushed occasionally under the table, a silent signal, grounding them in solidarity. Amidst this, personal reflection deepened. Taehyung thought of every moment leading to the kiss, late-night rehearsals, lingering glances, subtle touches, unspoken words. Each memory, each hesitation, now carried weight far beyond their private significance. He realized that the world had not just witnessed a kiss, it had glimpsed a lifetime of suppressed emotions, longing, and authenticity. Jungkook's quiet presence beside him reinforced this understanding. They weren't just surviving the aftermath, they were reclaiming it. Night after night, their conversations became strategic, introspective, and brutally honest. "We can't let them define our narrative," Taehyung said one evening, eyes fixed on the city skyline. Jungkook nodded. "But we also have to protect ourselves, not just from them but from losing each other in the process." This balance between defiance and protection, truth and survival, became their guiding principle. Every decision was filtered through it. The psychological toll was immense. Each new article, tweet, and comment reminded them of the fragile line they walked between freedom and condemnation. Taehyung sometimes felt his chest constrict with panic, imagining careers collapsing, families angered, fans outraged. Yet Jungkook's calm, steady presence provided a counterbalance, reminding him that they had already crossed the point of no return. They could not unkiss, undo, or silence their truth. They could only live it together. Yet even as pressure mounted, Taehyung found moments of quiet rebellion, playing the piano late at night, humming melodies of longing and defiance, sketching lyrics in notebooks that no one would see, small acts of tenderness toward Jungkook, fleeting but electric. These moments, though small, became their emotional lifeline. They reminded both that their humanity, their connection, and their love were untouchable by the chaos around them. As the public spectacle grew, they also began to reclaim agency. Carefully timed posts, cryptic messages, and creative projects allowed them to narrate their own story without capitulating. Fans dissected each detail, amplifying support. Social media became a platform for empowerment, resistance, and solidarity. Taehyung realized that the narrative wasn't entirely theirs yet, but the battle for it had begun in earnest. And for the first time, he felt hope that the world could witness them on their own terms. By the end of the week, a new equilibrium emerged, a delicate balance between chaos and control, exposure and protection, fear and love. Taehyung and Jungkook had endured relentless scrutiny, familial pressure, and corporate manipulation. Yet in the midst of it, their connection deepened, fortified by shared trials and unspoken understanding. Every touch, glance, and word carried weight, each small victory reinforcing their resolve. That night, after another exhausting round of interviews and negotiations, they found themselves on the rooftop of their apartment building. The city sprawled below, indifferent and alive. Taehyung wrapped an arm around Jungkook's shoulders, pressing close. "Do you ever wonder if it will be worth it?" he asked softly, voice nearly lost in the wind. Jungkook leaned into him. "I do, and I'd make the same choice again." A faint smile curved Taehyung's lips. In a world that had tried to control them, judge them, and silence them, they had chosen authenticity. They had chosen each other.